Hi, you guys. Welcome back. It's really nice to have you here. Following on from last week's video, which kind of delved into slightly more political issues without being political in any way, shape, or form, I thought we would pick up on a thread of immigration because we're going to talk about Britain and immigration because it seemed to kind of get a lot of comments and a lot of interest. So, obviously, this is a topic that we're all kind of maybe thinking about. And I'm going to kind of present a scenario and I'm going to explain some things because, as I've said before, this channel is about educating, informing, and giving a straight factual perspective. I'm not going to be political and I'm not going to be presenting a political bias here because that's not what this is about. This is about just putting some facts on a table and seeing what people think of it. As we said, this is a lot of the time like viewpoints, perspectives, opinions on things. And it feels like there's a lot of conversation going on around this topic and that there's a lot of things that people are interested in and want to know more about. And obviously, this is a channel's about British life and things that concern British people. It's not just mind dumps on me and my quirky little millennial culture, but we can sort of delve into this in a fair, respectful, and tolerant way and think about some of the questions and maybe why we have them and maybe why people feel the way they do or why people feel the way that they should or they don't feel the way that they should. So we're going to talk about it, and this is the premise of today's video. I really don't feel like I've got a good angle. I feel unbalanced, so I'm probably going to move around a lot on this video, so enjoy. So I'm going to pose a question. Can Britain really afford to cut immigration while facing an ageing population? So this is the thread that I'm pulling on, Britain's ageing population. And what do I mean by that? Our population is getting older. So back in the day, the retirement age was 60 for women and 65. And then there'd be a few years of claiming a state pension. And then, life expectancy wasn't as long or as high as it is today. So people weren't going to be drawing on those pensions until they were 90 or 100. People were probably going to draw on those pensions until they were 70 or 75 when this whole welfare state was established. And that was kind of how everything balanced out and how we could fund our lovely healthcare system. And it was a lot, there was a lot of variables involved in this. However, by 2047, nearly 1 in 4 people in the UK will be over 65. That means that 25% of our population will be older than 65 and therefore not of working age, but of an age where they will be drawing on their pension, as quite rightly they should. So they've put that money aside, they should be able to kind of have access to it. But we kind of need to realize that our aging population is affecting things. Who is more likely to need hospital care? Aging population. Who is more likely to need social care? An aging population. Who is not going to be putting back into the pot? An aging population. I mean, they've already contributed, absolutely, and we're not saying anything bad about that. However, we are failing to talk about this situation. And how do we overcome this situation? How do we stop an aging population? And that means that we're not dying at 70 now or 75. Some of us are living into our 80s, 90s, maybe getting to the age of 100. I know quite a few people have had a letter from the Queen. How do we, factor in that some people have got 45 years of claiming state pension and accessing resources that, that are finite. And don't get me wrong, I am going to be in this aging population. I am going to be there myself when it really is going to be a problem, rather than an emerging problem. So let's try to sort of think about that. So we are going to look at things on a balanced perspective here. So we're going to look at statistics, and we're going to talk about how everything works and how immigration is a big part of being able to afford an aging population. So this is kind of what we're focusing on today. So let's have some facts. Let's have some stats. A little point. In 1950, the UK average life expectancy was 65.5. In the most recent statistic I can get is from 2016, and it says the average UK life expectancy is 80 years old. So that's increased by 15 years, which is quite a lot. So that's 15 years above the average of the 1950s, which is great. We're living longer, we're healthier, we have better access to food and resources. Our healthcare system probably had something to do with that as well, and that access to free healthcare. So some brilliant, reasons why we are living longer. So by 2047, there will be 302 pension age people per 1,000 working people. And this is a statistic from 2022. And the number of people aged 85 plus will almost double from 1.7 million in 2022 to 3.3 million in 2047. So that's 22 years' time. So we are going to have double the amount of 85-year plus olds living in 2047. So in 22 years' time. And as somebody who remembers 22 years ago quite well, and how quickly those 22 years have gone, one is wondering what's going to be happening in the next 22 years. So births versus deaths. So obviously births help for natural population growth. However, it is actually quite close to zero. And without immigration, the UK's population would stagnate or worse still, decline. So why do we need a growing population? Well, because it is us that work and have children that pay into the system that looks after the aging population. We pay taxes. We contribute to the healthcare system. We work in the systems that support the aging population and the hospitals and the care homes, etc. So this is important, isn't it? And the challenge is that having more older people means higher costs because we've got pensioners, we've got more people in the NHS, and we've got more people in social care. And fewer workers means less tax revenue to fund all of this. That's important. That's just basic finances, isn't it? And in 2022, 19% of the UK population was over 65. So we're going to be going up by 2072 to, getting close to 30% of the population. And this is from the House of Commons Library. So obviously we're dealing with government statistics here. So these are kind of concerning figures and things that we need to think about. So over the next 20 years, the over 65 population will be growing quite excessively. And over 40 years, we will get to 6.5 million. And this statistic is for Centre for Aging Better. So the numbers are on the increase. That's great. We're living longer, we're living healthier. But have we increased our pension age? Well, actually, we did. And sadly, my mum was one of those people that got screwed over by this because she wasn't aware that she wasn't going to be retiring at 60 until she was much closer to the age of 60, and that she was going to be retiring at 66. And this is it. I think we are due a pension age claimant increase. That was really badly phrased, but I think you get what I mean, because I don't see how we're going to be able to work and retire in our 60s when we're going to be living for much longer than when the system was originally designed, it was feasibly kind of considered. And the demand on the NHS, whether we have the NHS in 20 years' time stands to reason. I know there's lots of different political parties who want to fight to keep it, want to privatise it. There's a lot of stuff going on there, but this video isn't about that. But older people account for 2/5 of hospital administrations. That's almost coming up to, that's over a third, coming up to half of the admissions, can I say that word, into hospital is old people, which, makes sense It's hard getting old. Things stop working. I've noticed this myself. And around 70% of social care funding goes to older people. That's from NHS England and the King's Fund. So again, I want to kind of reference my stats here so people can be, clear that this has been researched. So let's summarize some of these pressures, and there are a few. So rising old age means that there's a lot of dependency on these older people being looked after. Okay, the national population change will provide little growth or even decline. There's going to be increased pressure on health, social care, and pensions. People wanting those pensions. These pensions need to cover the cost of living, and the cost of living is getting quite, excessive, isn't it? It's all balanced. Inflation, gross domestic product, all of this stuff, and how much things cost. But if pensioners can't afford to live on their pension, that's kind of not fair. We do want to be looking after these people that have served us and, have provided and enabled us to have free, healthcare, and enabled us to have free education and all the perks that have come from having a state that is concerned with welfare. And also, we're going to have a shrinking labour force and labour gaps because it is going to generate more work, isn't it? If there are going to be an ageing population, it's going to have to be more people to serve this ageing population. So if there are fewer young people due to low birth rates and many older people retiring, there's a risk of shrinking or stagnating the workforce, which is going to impede economic growth. And economic growth is important in order to have, a very, balanced economy. And we're going to see this struggle in healthcare. We're going to see this struggle in social care. We might see it in hospitality and technology as well. And there are already shortages in these areas for staff. So we really need to think about this, don't we? Okay, so let's talk about a solution to this problem. It's immigration. Woo! Yay! Let's explain this because there's a lot of talk about immigration, and I want to separate this from illegal immigration. Illegal immigration is like 1% of immigration in the population, very minimal, lots of debates around that, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about why we need immigration in this. I really hope that my mics are going to work because I have family members around the house today, so if you hear them in the background, really sorry. So yeah, let's talk some facts and some benefits. Okay, so net migration in 2024 was 431,000, and that's from the National Statistics Agency. Migrants are typically younger and of working age. We don't tend to get migrants that are not capable of contributing back into our system, and therefore they boost the tax base, which is exactly what we want. Over 2022 and 2032, net migration is projected to add 9.9 million people, while natural change is actually negative. So if we didn't have these people coming in, we would be kind of losing people, and therefore that would cause problems. Immigration supplies labour in key areas. So actually, a lot of these people work in the places we need them to help this ageing population. So the NHS, social care, construction, and technology. And more workers fundamentally mean more taxes, which means they help fund the pensions that are paid out to the ageing population, and therefore help to support the healthcare that looks after the ageing population. So to summarise, immigration shows the worsening dependency ratio, so fewer pensioners per worker. Okay, so some more stats from the Office of National Statistics. Migrants are typically younger. The median age of UK-born residents is actually 41, compared to 31 for non-UK-born residents. The NHS workforce is 16% of nurses and midwives and 29% of doctors trained overseas. And this is from the NHS and the General Medical Council of the UK. Social care. So 20% of adult social care, the workforce, is from non-British people. And this statistic is from Skills for Care 2024. So basically, more workers mean more taxes. And migrants contributed an estimated 6 billion more in taxes than they took in benefits. And this is from Oxford Economics study of EEA migrants. So I'm just going to repeat that. 6 billion more in taxes. They contributed 6 billion more in taxes than they took in benefits. Okay, so I just want to repeat that the migrants who work in our country, the legally migrants in our country, they actually contributed 6 billion more than they took. That's a lot. 6 billion can do a lot of good. And we need that 6 billion, don't we? That's important money, especially when I've just raised this situation of having an aged population, having to pay to look after them because it ain't free. I mean, that 6 billion could be what's being spent on the pensions. Really key points to make here, guys. Don't you agree? Okay, so we're all about balance here. And if I've got you angry because you're thinking, oh, she's got this positive viewpoint, I'm here to be balanced. So there are costs and criticisms of migration. So migrants also use public services like the NHS, housing, and schools. However, I'm going to come back to that declining population. As I've said, I work in a school context and we are fighting for every child place we can fill. Because if we don't fill the child places, those children do come with government funding. And if we don't have enough, then we have to cut back somewhere because we haven't got enough children to cover the funding. So actually, we do want kids in school. We want to have the government funding to be able to pay the staff to teach the kids. And having a classroom full of 30 as opposed to a class full of like 15, it is going to be a lot, especially when it's £1,000 per child, roughly. So you can see how not having your school full can reduce the amount of funding. Sudden high levels of migration can put pressure on housing supply and local services. This is true. Again, the overrun hospitals. We've all been in those waiting rooms, haven't we? We've all, seen like people in A&E on a Monday night, and we get it. We do. We all feel it. We all see it. However, when you then go back to seeing the people that working in them are also migrants, then you suddenly realize that this is an important part and just, part of the system that we're all living and working in. There are integration challenges, and I think this is one of the biggest problems that we face as British people. And I talked about this last year, that maybe last video, we talked about how a sense of identity and this British identity has kind of got lost or over exacerbated, and this Britishness that might not technically exist but is being flouted around. Integration, when there's a lot of people that are very different to you culturally in your area, it can make you feel that you have to protect and, feel very careful about your own culture. But as I talked about in that video, multiculturalism is one of the strongest things we have going in this country. And our country is designed on lots of different influences. So I genuinely think that we could just review that and start to celebrate that rather than being threatened by it. And dependency, relying too heavily on immigration, does risk kicking the can down the road. Like if we just think migration is the only way to solve this problem and don't actually tackle it in different ways, then, we're not going to fix the underlying low birth rate. But the question is here, why aren't people having children? Why is the birth rate dropping? Is it because there isn't great childcare? It costs too much. Is it because now both parents have to go out to work in order to fund the lifestyles that we want? Is it because it's not appealing to have children anymore? Because the world is actually a scary and frightening place, and you don't want to throw kids into a world where climate change problems, threats of war, threats of intolerance, and persecution for how they choose to grow up. I mean, let's not be the architects of our own demise here and think about what we're doing and how we're damaging people's attitudes to having children. And I'm coming out of my child rearing, my childbearing years. I'm still in my child rearing years. I'm in childbearing years are probably starting to not be quite so, I'm not so fertile anymore. But, if you're a woman or, man in your late 20s or early 30s, which is probably typically when you will be choosing to start a family, when you've got a bit of financial stability, if you're looking around and seeing a great world that you want to raise kids in, or you're seeing a world full of problem and division and threats and, struggle, No one's going to want to raise children in that environment, are they? So, as I've said, net migration does add demand, and the Office of National Statistics says about 59% of the future population growth will come from immigration, and more people means more housing. And I don't mean like state housing, I mean like housing that's fit for purpose, new building developments, things like that. So there is a bit of like an issue where we need to like focus on this housing crisis that we might have heard being bandied about. We talk about the strain on the NHS, don't we? You know, evidence shows that migrants are generally younger and healthier, though, and might not need to use the NHS as much as this aging population. So they use NHS less per capita than UK-born citizens, and this is from BMJ 2018. So that's an interesting statistic, isn't it? That actually they're not straining the NHS, and that younger and healthier are those immigrants, and they don't need to use the NHS as much as UK-born citizens do. Or maybe not every immigrant is going to flout the system and choose to go to the NHS. Maybe they've come over here to work and they've got a great private healthcare plan and they're going to use that instead, because maybe they don't think our healthcare system is great just because it's free. They'd rather get their healthcare needs met far better. So again, sometimes we have these misconceptions, don't we? If these are intelligent, educated people who are earning a lot of money in their jobs, these doctors that are coming over from different parts of the world, maybe they've got private healthcare because they don't want to be part of the NHS system they work in. So again, sometimes we've got these stereotypes that can be quite damaging and not really bringing the big picture together. However, we do have a dependency on immigration if fertility rates stay low, and UK fertility rate was 1.49 births per woman in 2023, which is actually below replacement. Immigration only delays the aging pressures. Okay, so actually we do need that immigration, but we still need to sort out why women aren't having babies, or why families are choosing not to have kids, or variable factors in this. So there are costs and criticisms of immigration, but actually it's still important. We still do need these immigrants, and we need to be tackling some of these other issues in order to not be dependent on immigration as the answer and the only solution to our aging population issue. Okay, so I'm just going to mention the reform proposals. I'm not giving it any perspective on terms of political view on this. It's just that a political party have presented some proposals. I'm just going to talk about those proposals. I am neither for nor against them. That's not what I'm here for. I just want to talk about what they are because they kind of fit into the context of this video. So the big policies making headlines here were higher salary thresholds and stricter visa rules. So fewer lower to mid-skill migrants. To prevent people coming in with low to mid skills could be damaging, especially if they're ending up working in our care professions. That could be a problem, considering a lot of these people do look after our aging population. Closure of overseas recruitment for care workers, so major risk giving rising care demands. So again, it's just one of those things where we shoot ourselves in the foot because we think we're stopping something, but actually we're damaging ourselves. Extending the right to settle from 5 to 10 years. So actually it might discourage long-term skilled migration, possibly. That is a negative side of that. Digital ID system, stronger enforcement. It doesn't really directly solve the demographic pressures, but it could be a good idea. And the proposal is to scrap the IRL, so to not be able to legally take residency after you've been here for, say, 5 years. So the supporters of these changes argue that this protects British jobs, so British people can have those jobs, reduces housing problems and reduces NHS pressures and pushes businesses to train locals. So rather than seeking external people, we will take those 14-year-olds out of school and we will train them. Criticisms of that, though. They say this worsens labour shortages. Part of the problem is labour shortages. And I think is it 96% of the adult working population are employed. That means everybody is getting jobs. And therefore, it's the care sector that's really going to struggle here with this. And I've just mentioned that the social care system is what's looking after the pensioners. And then it shrinks the tax base. Again, what's the tax base shrinking going to do for us? It's going to mean that there ain't as much money to spend on the NHS, to spend on social care, education, housing. And it accelerates aging related fiscal pressures. Does that mean that this lovely age of 80, 85, 90 that people might be able to, live to is going to start reducing because of policies like this? And we actually might not be living as long because there ain't going to be anyone to look after us or care for us or money available for those pensions. And life could end up being very miserable. And our end of life care, if we don't make really considered choices and are only dependent on state funding and state services, that means it's going to really shoot poor people in the foot, isn't it? Because poor people pay for freaking everything, don't they? And we know that the millionaires are going to be able to look after themselves in their old age because they can pay for it privately. And when millionaires are telling us what we should do when they are not going to be suffering the consequences of this, that's when I get cross. So, yeah, there's some thoughts there. Fewer young migrants, smaller tax base. There's a couple of issues. I'm not saying this is good or bad. I'm just putting some questions forward. So, again, what do you think on this? Maybe this is the best news ever. I don't know. But the evidence doesn't suggest that it is. Let's just look at the unemployment context here a little bit. So the UK unemployment rate from May to July of 2025 from the Office of National Statistics said that 4.7% were unemployed. So that means it's roughly 1.67 million people are unemployed. And the claimant count on unemployed related benefits was 1.69 million. And the UK workforce is around 33 million employed people. So again, this is from the Office of National Statistics. And this means that over, as I've just said, 95% of the workforce, I think I said 97, but 95% of the workforce is already employed. So therefore, there are not enough unemployed people to simply replace migrants. And the reoccurring theme of this video is especially not in jobs like healthcare and care homes. And that is the services that the aging population needs the most. So I'm going to say this. If you are over the age of 65, you really need to be... we need immigrants. Okay, so let's draw things to an end now. So immigration is not a silver bullet. It is not the answer to our aging population issue, but it is currently the main driver keeping Britain's population growing and the workforce stable. I think we can all agree on that. So it's important. It has a place, not a plate. Cutting immigration sharply, could worsen care shortages, shrink tax revenues, make it harder to support the aging population. Those are three real scenarios. On the other hand, immigration must be managed fairly with investment in housing, services, and integration to make people want to be here and to embrace our culture and to be part of the system. So the key question is, should Britain rely on immigration or find other solutions like higher productivity, automation, or raising the retirement age so that people are paying into the system for longer and therefore not paying out for longer, if that makes sense? So immigration does help younger workers, boost tax revenues, fills the NHS and care roles, as we said. Do they cost money? Yes, they do, because it's going to be housing demand and political pressures. There seems to be a lot around these political pressures. But we need to be thinking about this. It's an important debate and it is out there and people feel really strongly about this. And we're not going to chastise people for their worries and concerns, but we should always come from things from, evidence and facts and to educate people. And if you were there, feeling a certain way about immigration, maybe this video is going to make you feel slightly differently. Maybe you're going to have a bit more of a broader perspective on it. Maybe there's some arguments that you can be using with people now and some facts and some statistics. Why can't I speak today? That you could be sharing with people. So, in summary, let's really conclude. So, the UK faces a rapidly ageing population, and that's only going to get older and bigger. A rising proportion of retirees and relatively weak natural population growth. So, basically, not enough births to, cover the deaths. So, that's what we mean by that. Under current projections, net migration is the main and in many scenarios, the only source of population growth over the coming decades. So we really need to be thinking about, how to offset that. If we don't want immigration, we need to be thinking about the solutions to the not having the immigration. Immigration helps by enlarging the working age population, supplying tax revenues, we all love that moolah, and supporting economic growth and reducing the per capita burden of supporting older dependents. Okay. However, immigration isn't actually a panacea. It shouldn't be the answer to this. It isn't the solution, it isn't the medicine to this. It must be well managed, well integrated. I suppose I don't want to say this, but the right immigrants to the right places, and complemented by broader policies promoting higher fertility, extending working lives. That might actually be that I need to work for longer, and productivity gains, investment in health and care. So hopefully you found my video balanced and fair. I've tried. What do you think about this? Do you think immigration is the answer to Britain's aging population? Or do you think there are better solutions? Feel free to put comments down below. I'm always interested in what you guys think and your thoughts. Should we be looking for more homegrown solutions? We live in a global world. Is actually this the answer to all our problems? Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your views. As always, I'm always interested to hear what you have to say. That's all for me. Ta-ta for now. Bye.